Hello there, folks. This is different, isn't it? Wow. And welcome to Motorcast. And today, this is a live stream, a lot different to what we're usually used to. But we're going to be reviewing live for you, exclusively on Motorcast, a 2-hour show, which will be an hour of us talking about the Grand Prix, another hour of hopefully a Q&A session. I'm with Nathan and Matty today, and we're going to be discussing the Australian Grand Prix. So it is nearly in fact, it is 4:30. 7.5 hours till the end of the day, but I don't really know how to mention that. But anyway, shall we get straight into the discussion for this? We've got 2 people watching, hooray, fantastic. 3 people watching now, but let's get straight into it. So I'll ask you now, Matty.
Yeah.
Kind of like short term, and what are your thoughts on F1's new era?
It's very good that we've finally got someone to come up against Mercedes, and Vettel obviously winning. Spoiler alert! I mean, well, you wouldn't be watching this if you hadn't seen the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Winning with what could be seen as quite a comfortable margin, 8 seconds, and being able to hold the lead pretty much from his first and only pit stop. So I don't know. I'm fairly happy with how things look at the moment.
And I think on that note, it'd be appropriate to read out the race results. So let's go then. So as Matty just said, Sebastian Vettel for Ferrari won the Grand Prix today with 57 laps done. He was second on the grid and got 25 points. Lewis Hamilton followed him then in second, just under 10 seconds behind. And Valtteri Bottas carried out the podium just a second or so behind Lewis Hamilton. Raikkonen was 4th in the Ferrari. Verstappen was 5th in the Red Bull. That was really all that they could do. Felipe Massa scored Williams' only points in 6th. Nearly a minute actually off Max Verstappen, over a minute off the leader Sebastian Vettel, and then we had Sergio Perez 7th, and then we had the 2 Toro Rossos headed by Sainz in 8th and 9th. Then the final point scorer was Esteban Ocon in 10th. We've got Nico Hulkenberg, Giovinazzi, who was actually, we're going to be talking a lot about him later and seeing what the 2 guys think of him, in 12th, and then Stoffel Van Dorn in 13th. We did have 7 retirees, which were Alonso, Magnussen, Stroll, Ricciardo, Ericsson, Palmer, and Grosjean. But like Matty said, I'm presuming if you haven't watched the race, then you wouldn't be here tonight to view this. So, Nathan, kind of a few more thoughts from you. What do you think about F1's new era?
I think it's certainly the right idea. I like the fact that the cars are quicker, but, I mean, from an entertainment perspective, this Grand Prix wasn't brilliant, to be honest. I mean, not to say you can write off an entire set of regulations based on one dull Grand Prix, but I think certainly the field is closer in some aspects than it was previously, with Ferrari being much closer to Mercedes, the midfield actually being very close with the likes of Toro Rosso, Force India, Renault, Haas, who are all relatively close to each other. So initial impressions have been quite mixed. From an entertainment standpoint, it's difficult to really judge after one Grand Prix, but I think certainly the field being closer and, the lesser Mercedes dominance means that at the moment I'm relatively happy with the regulation changes.
Yeah, and talking a little bit more about today's race then. So there's been a bit of a debate on Twitter after the race, and there's either one of 2 options, Matty. Was the Ferrari of Vettel better on the day? Or did he just get the luck with the overcut on the pits? Because obviously Hamilton was held up behind Verstappen for a long time after his stop, whereas Vettel got a fairly clean run, which asks the question as well, are Ferrari the real deal this season?
Well, that all kind of stems down to 2 factors. The first one being that Vettel pretty much stayed within about 2 seconds of Hamilton throughout the entirety of his first stint. And the fact that he managed to do an extra, about 6 or 7 laps on his tyres.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of shows me that the Ferrari's kind of on its tyres, or possibly that the Ferrari works better in hotter conditions, because I think it was quite a warm day. The track temperature is fairly high, but as we've seen in the past few years, the Ferrari has been very kind on its tyres. I feel like the pace is real, but obviously there's going to be tracks which suit one team more than another, as there is pretty much with any season where there's more than one team going for the championship. So initial thoughts are quite good for Ferrari. As long as they keep up with development, I feel like they're the real deal this year.
Yeah, the hype train before the season was real, but then after qualifying, it was kind of, they're not really competing with them. And it was a real shock today to see Vettel right behind Hamilton, then overtake him, obviously, from the overcut in the pits. Would you agree with Nathan? Do you think Ferrari are the real deal this season?
Well, they're certainly closer to Mercedes. I mean, I think they are certainly the real deal in the sense that they could certainly compete for both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship. But, I mean, just going off of this Grand Prix, there was, I don't really think, any overtaking with any of the top 5, top 6 positions. So I think it's a case of if Vettel didn't get the overcut in the pit strategy, I don't think he would have won. But at the same time, it was a case of if Hamilton deserved to win, but so did Vettel. It was just a case of Vettel got better on the pit stop strategy. But, you know, I mean, Ferrari would have needed a lot more than just a good pit stop strategy to win on occasions last season. Ferrari is certainly closer. They could certainly win for the championship, or they could certainly go to win the championship. So yeah, honestly, yeah, at the very least, at the moment, I'd say Ferrari are definitely the real deal.
And Hamilton definitely took it really well, that defeat today. I think both Vettel and Hamilton are relishing the opportunity to finally, in their Formula One careers, battle with each other for the title. And obviously, Valtteri Bottas will be another one battling for that title, in arguably still the best car, the Mercedes F1 car. And Matty, he's had a positive start to Mercedes, just a second and a half behind Lewis Hamilton. He got very close near the end of today's race. Is there any chance he can get the better of Hamilton when he gets used to that car?
Absolutely, but initial impressions, I was expecting maybe a bit too much from him because I was a little bit disappointed with his performance, especially on Saturday in qualifying. I felt he could have been a bit quite considerably closer than he was. But during the race, there was flashes of brilliance from him, especially during the midpoint of the race where he was significantly catching Hamilton up. But then you kind of think towards the end, he's kind of stabilised around about 2.5 seconds behind him. And you kind of think maybe was there a little bit of team orders there, or maybe it's just tyres running out. But I think it's a solid first race. Definitely could have seen more from him, but you can't really complain too much about how his race went.
And I think you could definitely say, Nathan, that Australia isn't the best spot for Bottas to show his skill, because I think he hasn't done well around Australia in any of his years in Formula One. China and Bahrain definitely best tracks for him. So we should kind of say up to the European season in China, Bahrain and Russia. Do you think he can get a win before Spain?
Potentially. I mean, he seems to be, at the moment, slower than Hamilton. That seems to be a given at the moment. Of course, we've already said that, this track hasn't favoured Bottas historically, but it seems to be more a case of whether the opportunity presents itself, really. It's just, I think it all comes down to qualifying, really, or, a better race strategy. I mean, I don't think Bottas is incapable by any means of being able to win a Grand Prix. At the moment, slightly slower than Hamilton. I put it this way: I wouldn't put money on Bottas winning prior to the European leg of the season, but it wouldn't be that much of a surprise if he did, to be honest.
Interesting thoughts there. So on to the other flying Finn. He wasn't quite so flying today compared to his teammate. He seemed to be quite a way behind, but bizarrely set the fastest lap. Was his testing pace a bit of a fluke, Matty, or did you think today was just a bit of a weird race?
Difficult question, because like with Bottas, I was expecting a lot more from Raikkonen. With Raikkonen, there's always the question about his mindset, whether he's really going for races or not. And I don't know. Maybe his testing pace was a little bit of a sham, but I'm sure there'll be some point in the future where hopefully Raikkonen comes into this. But I'm just a little bit disappointed, really, because he showed a lot of promise in testing. I definitely don't think it's a sham, but I feel he can definitely give more. Considering Vettel won the race and he was struggling in fourth.
Yeah, it's very disappointing, Nathan. He couldn't really challenge in qualifying either. Do you think it's just this weekend, or do you think it might be the tail of the season and it's just the three drivers and Raikkonen's kind of there as somebody who could get a podium if either of the Mercedes drivers really split up or, really slip up? But Do you think that Raikkonen has still got it, or do you think it's just gone now?
That's a tough one because, I mean, honestly, this was more sort of the pace I was expecting from Raikkonen prior to pre-season testing. But then, of course, in pre-season testing, he was right up there on the pace. So it's quite confusing because he was really quick in testing. He seems to have dropped off at the moment. I think this will probably be one of the worst performances for Raikkonen. I imagine. I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised if we see, multiple second place finishes, maybe even a race win from Raikkonen. I don't think, because I mean, right now, well, this Grand Prix, should I say, he never really saw both Mercedes drivers or his teammates, past the first few laps. I think he will be much closer. I'll be surprised if he beats Vettel in the championship, but I really do suspect that this has got to be one of his worst races in the season. But yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't imagine he'll be beating Vettel at the very least.
Yeah, it's definitely a shock really today. But on to Red Bull then. So today and really the weekend, Ricciardo retired on lap 25 with a wheel issue. It was just a nightmare this weekend for Daniel Ricciardo, and it really started on Saturday when he spun on not the penultimate corner, but just before that. It's a really bizarre incident, but Red Bull put it down to a driver error. Then after that, he just seemed to have absolutely no luck. A 5-place grid penalty, and as David Coulthard said, that was enough. Never mind those issues that he had, and he had to start from the pit lane, and then he was 2 laps behind, and it just wasn't very good for him. But on to Max Verstappen. There's not really much you could talk about for Ricciardo because nothing particularly happened in this state. But Max Verstappen, Nathan, do you think he really did as much as he could be expected to do today?
Probably. I mean, the Red Bull, we still don't really quite know where the Red Bull is on pace. I think it's certainly a top 3 car, but I mean, Verstappen race results, I mean, he was 5 seconds behind Raikkonen come the end, but then he was just shy of a minute ahead of Felipe Massa in 6th. So it's a difficult one. No, I mean, Max Verstappen, you do get the impression that Red Bull won't be really competing with Ferrari or Mercedes, certainly for the first half of the season anyway. As we said, we don't really know quite where Ricciardo is, but I don't think Ricciardo is going to be too far away from where Verstappen was this Grand Prix. But at the moment, it seems like Red Bull, they're going to be in 3rd place, literally miles ahead of 4th, and I don't think quite able to really challenge Ferrari or Mercedes. So I think they'll be in essentially no man's land.
Interesting. Do you agree with that, Matty?
Yeah, kind of just filling the gap between the midfield and the front two, really. Obviously, Verstappen was catching up to Raikkonen towards the end, but then got a little bit distracted by trying to get fastest lap, which I guess it's if that's all you've got to go for, since your car doesn't really have the power to get past the Ferrari. I mean, even though they are using like a modified Renault engine, they still don't have the best. I think they're still using last year's ERS system or something like that. So obviously a bit down on power. But with Red Bull, you know what they're like. The chassis and the aero and the cars is always top notch. As we could see through the middle sector, I think they were one of, if not the fastest cars through the middle sector, which is pretty much all about downforce. And I feel like just pretty much with what Nathan was saying, towards the first half of the season, they're just not going to be there because they've started almost on the back foot, really. But I'm sure they will catch up, and you'll probably see them with a major upgrade coming into the European races, which should hopefully get them up or thereabouts with the top 2.
Yeah. And on to Williams then. Massa finished P6. Very respectable result, as really Red Bull. I think Massa does the best that he could do in that Williams car today. Over a minute behind Kimi Raikkonen in 4th, and just under a minute behind Max Verstappen in 5th. He was the only driver behind the top 5 to not get lapped today. Sergio Perez finished 7th, and he got lapped. One really placed up on his grid position. A retirement for Lance Stroll as well. A retirement on Lance Stroll on lap 40 with an engine problem. Really, the question is, Matty, Williams, they've only really got one solid driver at the moment. We could say that because until Stroll finishes the race, he's not picking up any points. So Force India, or what? Massa's got 8 points and Force India have 7 at the moment. That is, that is 7. That's correct. Over the season, on top, Force India or Williams?
I think Force India, honestly, just due to the fact they always bring a really major and a really effective upgrade mid-season around about Silverstone time. And Williams tend to lose a lot of time over the course of the season. Like, they just don't have the money to be able to fund the effective development curve. So the fact that Force India are this close already to Williams would worry Williams.
And well, another question to you there, Matty. Then this is a real challenging one. Can Ocon kind of outweigh the driver that's been there for years, or will Perez just beat Ocon this season?
I think it's a bit early to call. Obviously, Perez had the stronger result today, but Ocon had a far from plain race, being stuck behind Alonso for the vast majority, and only being able to get by really once Alonso's suspension. He had problems with his car towards the end. So problems. It's his first race in the Force India. Obviously, the car is way quicker than the man ever could be. So give him a bit of time. I'm sure he'll get up there.
Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of Williams and Force India covered. Just ask Nathan, really. Double points for Force India. It's a good start, isn't it, really?
I mean, it certainly is a good start. But, I mean, were we really expecting anything less from Force India? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, in recent years, they've always been a solid team. But just on the question of whether they'll beat Williams, I still reckon Williams will beat Force India come the end of the season, but I think Matty did raise a good point, actually, that Force India generally improve over the course of the season massively compared to Williams. But I mean, you can't write off Lance Stroll just off of a few testing days and one Grand Prix, especially as he didn't even retire from the Grand Prix due to his fault. Yeah. So, I mean, Williams have the underlying pace. I mean, Massa was ahead in qualifying. I mean, I know Lance Stroll wasn't, but I think that was more of an anomaly than anything else, really. So I would still put money on Williams, but that could be a tough one, I think, like it always has been over the past few years.
Yeah, very interesting. So next on to Haas. We're going to go a little bit further down the grid, and actually both drivers retired today. Magnussen because of a tyre on lap 46, and then Roman Grosjean guttingly, after a P8 on the grid, transmission failure on lap 13 it was put down to. But desperately unlucky for Grosjean in the Haas. And I said before the season that the pace was good, but people seem to dismiss them. Their testing pace wasn't brilliant, but they did the laps. And I actually think they've got the pace. But I mean, proven by Grosjean yesterday. Matty, do Haas have the pace, or am I just being delusionised?
No, you're right. At the moment, they have the pace, but the big thing for Haas is that they've got to get as many points as they can now before they lose all their time advantage, because they can't really develop the car. I mean, we saw that last season. Maybe it's going to be different this season, but losing a 6th place at the start of the season for them is heartbreaking, because if you're looking at last year, their top 2 results came in the first 2 races.
Yeah.
So they've it's almost like they've lost half of their points already for the season, possibly. I mean, that's probably a bit dramatic, but you get the idea. If they follow the same development trend as they did last season, they're just not going to be anywhere, and they're going to be a lot of points down on what they could have been in the constructors, especially, is kind of what they're going for. Obviously, for Grosjean on a personal level, it's a bit gutting, because best qualifying for Haas and going out with a technical problem is not the ideal thing, but it's just more racing that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And Nathan, what do you think of Kevin Magnussen? He just didn't seem to be on the pace of Grosjean whatsoever this weekend. Is it his last chance saloon this season?
Well, it certainly would be if he's going to be that far off the pace off of Grosjean. I mean, personally, I've always rated Magnussen. I've always liked him. I thought he's a pretty decent driver. But yeah, I mean, that opinion would come under fire quite a lot after this Grand Prix. But I mean, I think Grosjean has shown that the Haas is a capable car. It's certainly quick, well, easily capable of scoring decent points. But Magnussen was just dreadful in qualifying, at the very least. I mean, it was actually dreadful, full stop, really. I mean, honestly, it would be his last chance saloon because, I mean, you look at that pace they had compared to his teammate Grosjean, and why on earth would you sign him? And, you could say the same for Jolyon Palmer at Renault. I mean, if you're that far off the pace of Grosjean, and Grosjean's a decent driver, but I don't think he's quite on the level of, I don't know, like Vettel or Hamilton. So if you're that far down off of Grosjean, then you're dreadful. But that would be jumping to conclusions. I mean, we've only done one Grand Prix. There's still more time for Magnussen and Palmer and any other driver, Stroll, who seem to underperform. There's still time for them to redeem themselves. But yeah, it's kind of a make or break season for them.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see Magnussen get some points and actually improve. Because, like you say, he's quite a likeable character, and he competed quite well with Jenson Button in 2014. And obviously in 2016, well, Palmer hasn't done very well, which shows that kind of Magnussen only beat him because he's better than a bad driver, proven by this weekend. But I don't think we'll call any of them bad drivers, because in the end of the day, they are Formula One drivers, so the best drivers in the world. But on to Renault then. So Hulkenberg outclasses Palmer, a bit of the same of Haas, differing fortunes. Hulkenberg just outside the points of Matty. And I best on the Channel 4 highlights that you were watching the battle between Ocon, Hulkenberg and Alonso near the end. And that was just mad, wasn't it?
That was absolutely crazy. Seeing the cars going 3 wide down the main straight. I honestly thought Hulkenberg was going to have a go on Ocon there and just try and sneak past them both. But yeah, I mean, that just takes big balls to be able to pull off a move like that. And then, but overall, I think Hulkenberg, I was possibly expecting a bit more from him because during the practice sessions, at least, he was promising a decent amount of pace. In the race, he did have a pretty straightforward race, apart from the last few laps. But I think the underlying pace of the Renault is better than last year, but it's just not the same as, obviously, as Force India. It's probably a bit better than McLaren with him, consistently catching on. So at the end of the race, but for Hulkenberg versus Palmer, it seems like it's such a one-sided battle. But I want to give Palmer the benefit of the doubt, at least for the race, in that he was having braking issues, and I mean, I'm not sure what went on in qualifying at all, being so far down on Hulkenberg. But yeah, part of me wants Palmer to be able to prove himself because he did win the GP2 championship a few years ago now, by quite a considerable margin. So there is talent there. It's just not performing in the Formula One car, which of course is, you can do as well as you can in junior formula, but it's the real test once you get the 1,000 horsepower cars we've got now.
And one of the people that obviously Jolyon Palmer beat in GP2 was Stoffel van Dorn. And, it might be a bit embarrassing to say this, but it was actually a miracle today, wasn't it, Nathan? Because McLaren actually finished a race.
Yeah, it was a bit of a miracle, to be honest. But, I mean, not to say that Van Dorn's pace was especially brilliant by any means, finishing in 13th. Yeah, I mean, it's a good start, for McLaren to at least have one of their cars finishing. So, I mean, actually, that's better than Haas as well in terms of reliability. But I think, especially when you're that far down, like McLaren are, you just, you use a race weekend and even the race itself, as kind of a form of testing. So, I mean, there's no doubt that McLaren and I guess more specifically Honda, they're going to be, doing all sorts of testing and, finding improvements and all sorts. But, I mean, yeah, I guess they kind of exceeded expectations in terms of the fact that they finished. But, I mean, still, in terms of the actual pace they had, certainly from Van Dorn, yeah, it wasn't really great, to be honest.
Yeah, it was just a weird race, to be honest, for McLaren. And I don't know if you heard Nathan, but Alonso said, and it's fair enough considering today's pace, that Alonso thinks that McLaren have got the slowest car on the grid. He thinks even the Sauber have finished faster than them. Yeah, he said he said that after the race today. And that's a pretty negative comment to McLaren and Honda. I don't think that's just Honda. I mean, he completely ripped Honda apart at testing, but the team and Honda ripped apart today by saying that, and I'm pretty sure he said this because I did look at an article that said he said this, but he said that McLaren have got the slowest car this season, which is pretty embarrassing, to be honest. And judging on today's pace, I think he's right.
Well, I tell you what, it's a good thing he's considered to be one of the best drivers on the grid, because if that was most other drivers saying that, you'd be sacked, wouldn't you, on the spot? But I mean, I have to say I agree with him.
He is allowed to get away with stuff like that. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily true that they've got the slowest car. They've definitely got the worst engine. Once again, Honda just have not turned up with that engine at all. I still think the Sauber is slower. And Palmer and the Renault is again slower than that. But it's with Alonso in, it's probably flat. It was probably flatter in the car a little bit, to be honest, with him being in 10th for most of the race. So I think no, it's not the slowest car. Absolutely not.
And I'll just quote what Alonso said here, and he said, "I think we are last. That's the performance we have now. We were 10th because the qualifying lap yesterday was extremely good. At the start, I was lucky to gain one position, and Grosjean retirement gave us the second one. But I think in normal conditions, on a normal circuit, we should be last and second last." And that's a pretty harsh comment there from Fernando Alonso on the subject of interviews. I don't know if you saw that awkward little interview yesterday. Jolyon Palmer, after qualifying, saying that he said that there was no grip in the car. He said that the handling was crap. He said that the car was crap. And that's not very nice to the team, really, is it? Because the team obviously had to rebuild his car following his FP2 crash, I think, or was it FP3? I can't quite remember which one it was. FP2. But he completely, slagged off the team, really. And, just said that the car was awful after the team had done that. And, Matty, you said that Fernando Alonso can get away with it. Do you think there might be a little cheeky visit to the room of, I can't say his name, Cyril, whatever his name is, Cyril something. Do you think there'll be a visit for Jolyon Palmer there after today's race? Or even before that, maybe?
Well, Jolyon Palmer is in no way in any position to be able to blame Renault for qualifying, at least, because, I mean, they got the car finished up for him after his own mistake. So for him to then call out the team and then say, this car is a pile of... is not really very courteous, and I doubt he's making any friends with the mechanics there. As well as that, he doesn't have the reputation of Alonso, so he also can't get away with it because of that. Keep an eye on him. If he keeps on complaining, you'll just get replaced, and if he keeps on performing like he is, you'll get replaced. So he needs to really pick up his act and shut his mouth.
Well, exactly, but we've had a comment from F1's Game PlayStation from Dave on the McLaren situation, saying that there's no one else to blame but Honda. They've had plenty of time to get on the pace, and he says that it's not the company it used to be back, I presume he's talking about back when they supplied the Honda factory team back in the 2000s, and he thinks it's time to find someone else. So Nathan, do you agree?
Well, it's kind of a tricky one. Because McLaren, they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, really, because if they got Mercedes engines, they would certainly be quicker. But, I mean, the reason Ron Dennis went with Honda was purely because, and he's right in saying it, that he's not going to win with a customer engine. Like, there's no way unless something extraordinary happened, that McLaren would be faster than Mercedes using their own engines. Like, I mean, I agree with Ron Dennis, even though he's not at the team anymore, but I agree with the idea that you need a different engine to be able to have a chance of winning. But, I mean, it just hasn't gotten anywhere. In the past, was it his third year, Honda are back, making engines. 3 years, and they've just got nowhere. So, like, yes, they would be better with pretty much any other engine on the grid, but the thing is McLaren, they're not really aiming, to finish third or second or whatever. At the end of the day, a team like McLaren, they're going to be aiming to, win both championships, and they're not going to do that with Mercedes engines. Yeah, they probably won't do that with Honda engines. Maybe, maybe in a few years' time, who knows? I doubt it, but yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can't really do anything, to be honest. Yeah.
Just kind of following on from that, obviously McLaren do have their road cars division. Is there anything stopping McLaren from perhaps making their own engines, or even doing something similar to Red Bull and taking a Honda engine or even a Mercedes engine and modifying it in their own way?
Because they have built a V8 engine in the past, like you say, for the road cars.
Well, they've got cars with effectively curse systems in their road cars, notably the P1. So why they couldn't just do it for their F1 car, I don't know. And then, because I mean, at the moment, McLaren are still effectively a customer engine team. They are the ones. Well, they're the only ones using the Honda engine, but they're still relying on Honda to make the engine. It's not as if it's a factory effort. So if they're wanting to have a proper factory car, they're going to have to make the engine themselves and not rely on Honda, unfortunately, because Honda just aren't performing at all.
And I did see an article on Autosport this morning, which particularly confused me. Apparently, Autosport reported that Honda are in talks with other teams to go and supply them. And now, why the hell would any other team want to be supplied by Honda at the moment? Please answer me that question, Nathan.
There
isn't really any answer, is there? There's no reason.
I've got something. I mean, I don't know why Honda would agree to these terms, but am I right in saying that Honda give their engines to McLaren for free? I think they do. Sure. I think they do. Okay, assuming they do, now I'm pretty certain Sauber have to pay for their engines from Ferrari. So it would save Sauber, a cash-strapped team, or at least historically. I don't know if that's quite the case anymore. But it would save Sauber a lot of money if they went with Honda and if Honda agreed to give their engines for free. The thing is, though, is Sauber don't really have the budget and they're not really the name for Honda to be willing to give their engines away for free to them. I mean, to McLaren, fair enough, because you can trust that McLaren will build a good car, but I don't know why Honda would agree to give their engines away for free to Sauber.
It is kind of a weird situation with Sauber because they are, I think most people consider them to be the slowest car. So having a Honda engine in that is terrible is not going to change the fact that they're going to be the slowest car. They're just going to be a lot slower. But is having a Ferrari engine in, despite it being a year old, and it's probably still better than this year's Honda engine. Is that a necessary evil for Sauber to be paying for that? Part of me thinks it is. To at least make the car semi-competitive.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Sauber should go for Honda engines, but if Honda were into talks to supply to any other team, Sauber literally is the only other team that I can imagine that would be willing to even consider, a Honda engine partnership. There's no other team that would, because they either have got their own engines or they've got links already. So, yeah, I'm not saying Sauber should do it, but it's just they're the only ones who would even remotely consider it.
But it would definitely be nice to see another team get a Honda engine purely for the fact to see how they compare with McLaren. Because my idea is that McLaren always build a good chassis, and
air on the car's generally been okay.
A team like Sauber, I don't think would be as good. So I don't know. But we've got our first question of the day with the hashtag Motorcast Live. You can tweet us on Twitter at Motorcast Live. And this is from James Casey. So are you ready for this then, folks? This is about McLaren and Fernando Alonso, the team we've just been discussing. And James says, Nathan, I'll get you to answer this one first. Do you think Fernando Alonso will even stay to the end of the season if McLaren don't move up the grid? After today's comments, he seems to have had enough.
Well, I mean, he always seems to have had enough. I mean, this has been speculated. Yeah. This has been speculated for years that Alonso could leave mid-season, or could leave during testing, or could leave before the start of the next season. I mean, the thing is I know Fernando Alonso. He mentions it from time to time that he really doesn't want to retire until he's won a third world championship. The problem is I don't know how old he is, but he's one of the older drivers on the grid now. I just don't think he's going to have a shot at doing it. Because he could stick with McLaren, but I don't see McLaren being in contention to win a championship within the next, 5 years at least. And I don't see any other team that would take on Alonso unless he replaced Bottas and Mercedes, which I think is unlikely. No, I mean, I don't know. I think it would. I don't know. I mean, Alonso wouldn't want to go because he wants to win the third world championship desperately. But I think at some point you've got to admit defeat and just, walk away while you can, because he's clearly, pretty fed up with it.
Well, if Bottas is on if Bottas is on a 1-year contract, is what is reported, I think. If things get so bad at McLaren and Bottas isn't really getting the results from Mercedes, it isn't out of the question that Alonso goes to Mercedes for a season, has a crack at the championship. If he wins races and gets close, and then he's satisfied that he's given it his all and he's had the best car and the best opportunity, then he could probably retire. So I think Alonso going to Mercedes next year is probably quite a likely thing to happen compared to other driver switches.
That's an interesting comment. But I think with Alonso, the problem is with the older drivers, you have kind of like, if people follow football that are watching, you've got the Arsene Wenger situation. And in the end, if you stay for too long, you remember for the bad things. You're not necessarily remember for the championships. Because obviously Alonso, it's been 11 years since he won that championship. And fans that have only really been watching the last few years will remember him for this, the bad years at Honda, and not necessarily for in the 2000s beating Schumacher in 05 and 06. And winning the championship with Renault twice. I mean, if you say to a new F1 fan that Renault won the championship twice 10 years ago, they'll be like, what the hell are you on about? But I don't know about Alonso. But Matty, kind of like the same kind of question to you. Will Alonso stay to the end of the season at McLaren?
He'll stay until the end of the season, but after that, don't know. I'd probably say move to Mercedes could be on it at the end of the season.
Okay. Right, very interesting. Okay, so we've got a little bit sidetracked from the questions, but that's good. If you have any questions that you wish to ask, just do what James has done and put hashtag Motorcast Live. We've got another one straight away, so we can get even more sidetracked once again from that. Again, we've got we've just got the one question. That's fine. And this is from Jordan Peacock, who was actually meant to be our special guest, but he couldn't turn up, so we have no special guest, but we will for next time. But let's just gloss over that really quickly. And enough one about McLaren. McLaren seems to be the popular team today. Nathan. So, will McLaren's woes potentially kill Van Dorn's career? I think he's 25 today, actually. His birthday was today. And he's waited for years for the seat, and then it's a bad car. He's not going to have any success this year. Is it going to be a talent wasted?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's widely recognised that Van Dorn is a decent driver. I mean, it's difficult to tell now because of how poor the McLaren is. I don't think it's going to destroy his career. I mean, chiefly because I don't see McLaren getting rid of Stoffel Van Dorn anytime soon. I don't think it will wreck his career. He is a recognised decent driver. I mean, I don't see even why McLaren would get rid of him, to be honest. So, no, I think for the time being, he's safe. I mean, certainly compared to, Palmer or Magnussen or, I just don't see why they get rid of him so soon after getting him. In the same way for Lance Stroll. I don't see why Williams would get rid of Lance Stroll, even though he's been underperforming at the moment. You wouldn't get rid of someone just after you've got them. So no, I think Van Dorn's career is safe, at least for the short term.
I don't necessarily think it's an insecurity issue, though, Matty. I think it's one of those things that if he's going to stay at McLaren now, there's no doubt about it. He's been waiting for that seat for years, and unless a better seat comes about, which doesn't seem to be happening, he's going to be stuck in that situation unless the kind of situation gets better at McLaren. Will Van Dorn's career be spoiled in the first few years anyway? I mean, obviously, you look at people like Jenson Button, and his career really didn't get started till 2004 till he had a good car with Honda. But, Stoffel Van Dorn, it's not the same, is it? Because he's nearly 25 now. And say he has a 10-year career, this year and maybe next year could just be ruined.
Well, definitely, he doesn't have time on his side to kind of play around. But, I mean, it's weird because he's only 25, but at this point in time, 25 is quite a late start. I mean, if we remember back to when Hamilton came in, he was, 22, 23? Only 2 years younger. It will probably hinder him a little bit, but everyone knows that Van Dorn is a talented driver. So, if it doesn't, he's going to have to think quickly, or fairly quickly, whether he wants to keep going with McLaren. I mean, personally, I don't see sticking with McLaren being a particularly good idea. Obviously, there's the possibility of a Ferrari seat and a Mercedes seat on the horizon, and you never know what's going to happen with other teams. So he definitely has a way out if he decides, no, I've had enough of McLaren. It's just, obviously, he needs to look on his side to be able to get himself out of that seat.
Yeah, hopefully we haven't got another question to answer now. No, we haven't. Right, we can get on with the last two teams. We're leaving Sauber and particularly Toro Rosso out. We haven't said a word about Toro Rosso yet. And in fact, they performed quite well, Nathan, didn't they? Because, double points for them. 6 points, a very good start. Both finishing where they started on the grid. And happy days for them. And do you think that Kvyat in that Red Bull seat this time last year, can he kind of right the wrongs from last year and get a bit more confidence in him?
I certainly think so, to be honest. I mean, Kvyat, he was even starting to do that. I believe from memory, I think he was even starting to right the wrongs, come the back end of last season, really.
Yeah.
So, Kvyat, it's kind of a tragic tale with Kvyat, once, a very decent, a highly recognised driver with a lot of confidence put into him, then a broken man. I think he is slowly rebuilding his confidence. I think the problem is, though, with this whole kind of Red Bull Young Driver program, that even if Kvyat does, regain the confidence and he's on par with Carlos Sainz, I don't know if there's anyone who is waiting to come through the Red Bull Young Driver Academy soon. But if there is,
they've got Gasly.
Good point.
Yeah, he's hot on the heels of if any of them are going to slip up.
Yeah, well, that's a good point then. I mean, Pierre Gasly, I assume Red Bull are going to really, consider to get him in an F1 car relatively soon. And you just get the impression that Kvyat's going to get the chop. So the problem is Verstappen is young. So is Daniel Ricciardo. They're not going to leave Red Bull anytime soon. Why would they? I think the problem is one of the Toro Rosso drivers is inevitably going to get the chop soon, regardless of how well they do. So I think, in a way, it's kind of irrelevant how well Kvyat does. I mean, unless he massively outperforms Sainz, to be honest. But, he's certainly recovering from the low points of last season.
Well,
continue on with that. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, it kind of highlights the problem with the Red Bull driver tree. With that, it doesn't seem as if Ricciardo or Verstappen are going to go anywhere. And as you said, they're very young. So you get a kind of stagnation in the kind of Toro Rosso seats. You've got Sainz here on his third season. And usually, looking back historically, if you're on your third season at Toro Rosso, you're going to get the chop the year after. Mm-hmm. So it kind of depends a lot on what happens at the top two. So I feel there's a potentially a link between Ricciardo going to Ferrari, but we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, Vettel being the teammate, I'm not sure how that dynamic would potentially work, considering they've been teammates for a year and it didn't particularly work out then. But it's just kind of the problem that they have, in that the drivers tend not to go to other teams, and they tend to retire from Formula One or leave Formula One rather than switch alliances.
But I think the debate with the Toro Rosso drivers has got to be down to the number of teams. You look at Daniel Ricciardo. He wasn't at Toro Rosso at first. He was at HRT. And for these drivers to get into Formula One, there's got to be enough teams to take them on. I mean, most of the teams, you know, Mercedes have got their own driver academy, which kind of they used Manor as a second team last year. And before that, obviously Red Bull have got their own driver academy. And Ferrari have got Giovinazzi as their third driver. You know, I think. Do you think, Nathan, that we need more teams to support the coming in of drivers that maybe couldn't get a seat at, say, Toro Rosso for the Red Bull driver program?
Oh well, definitely. No, definitely. I mean, you know, it's been a common theme of the past few seasons, at least. You know, that there's always been a log jam of drivers trying to get in. I mean, you raised the point perfectly about Ricciardo, who, you know, got in through HRT. I'm sure there's tons of other drivers who've got in through smaller teams who I can't think of right now. I mean, yeah, Alonso through Minardi, or, you know, or Raikkonen through Sauber. I mean, you do kind of need more teams to be able to get people to, you know, to actually new people to come into the sport, especially when you got people like Raikkonen and Alonso and even Massa, actually, who just don't seem to want to go. Well, Massa kind of excluded, but I mean, you do.
Raikkonen just seems to be given contracts year after year, despite him not particularly wanting it.
Well, he's not going to turn down the money, is he?
No, that's true.
No.
That's very true. But, you know, another driver that obviously started with it in a low team was obviously Lewis Hamilton with McLaren in 2007. very much started from the bottom and coming up to the top. No dig intended there, but yeah, Toro Rosso, it's the same old debate with drivers that we need more teams to, you know, obviously get drivers into Formula One. Then we got the funding issue. I mean, we had the 3 teams that came in 2010 have all gone now. It's just a bit sad, really, but there we go. So on to our last team, Sauber. We haven't really said anything about Sauber yet. We did mention Giovinazzi's name earlier, a name that was in GP2 last year. Obviously, a very impressive debut for him, just behind Ericsson in qualifying. And obviously, the only Sauber to finish with Ericsson having a fuel pressure issue on lap 21 today. So P12 for him. Will he be in the car more often now, Nathan? And could this create a rift between Wehrlein and Sauber?
Could easily. I mean, Wehrlein, he did voluntarily give up his seat to Giovinazzi, so you got to respect him for that. And I heard that Sauber, you know, did say that, you know, that they do respect Wehrlein, you know, for being open and honest with that. But I mean, Giovinazzi proved himself to be very decent. Even if you just take qualifying alone, he was right up there with Marcus Ericsson. There's no reason not to put Giovinazzi back in the car, apart from the fact that you've also got Wehrlein there. That's the problem with Sauber, is they've got 3 kind of very similarly, equally matched, relatively decent drivers, to be honest. You would hate to be anyone at Sauber right now, like because, I mean, I would probably still put Wehrlein back in the race seat because, you know, because that's what he's contracted for, and it's not like Giovinazzi did anything amazing this Grand Prix. It was just very good, but certainly it could easily cause a rift, you know, between Wehrlein and Sauber and Giovinazzi easily.
Yeah, very interesting there. And Matty, Ericsson obviously not finishing today. Giovinazzi, could he be the next in line at Ferrari?
Possibly, but Ferrari tend not to stick with their young drivers. Obviously, there was Perez used to be a Ferrari young driver. He ended up McLaren. We've had who else have we had?
Jean-Eric Vergne as well. Well, he wasn't technically a young driver.
Well, no, he was.
And Gutierrez as well.
Gutierrez, but obviously he didn't really show much potential at Sauber when he was given his opportunity first. It could be the one who kind of doesn't continue the trend. But Ferrari have got a load of other young drivers in Fuoco, Leclerc, who also could be in line for that. Obviously down in lower formulas, but I doubt it. Ferrari will probably go for a more established driver rather than bringing in a rookie straight away. But they'll certainly fund a seat for him, should it come to that, and if there's a seat available. Well, similar to what they've done here, to be honest.
And, well, there's no point really talking about the driver market just yet, because we have just finished the first race, and silly season will kind of start when we get to the summer break. That's a long way away yet. I don't want to think about that far away. We just want to enjoy the racing bit by bit in this 2017 season. It seems like a thrilling Formula One season to go for. So a bit of a preview for China then. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen because, well, after today's race, I'm really puzzled. It could be any of them from Ferrari or Mercedes, whether it be Hamilton, Bottas, Raikkonen or Vettel. Or as we said in the MotoGP preview, Matty, it could even be Tito Rabat. It could
even be Tito Rabat.
It could take the switch from 2 wheels to 4 wheels, and actually that race is on at 7 o'clock, so I'll definitely have to watch that. Yeah, anyway. 2017 Chinese Grand Prix. Nathan, who will be the top step of the podium? Will it be Rosberg? No, it won't. Will it be somebody else? Yes, it will. Who will it be?
I'll chime in. I reckon I'd still put my money on Hamilton. To be honest, I'd still put my money on Hamilton to be at the top. Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down really to qualifying. Certainly, I mean, I know at China it's going to be much easier to overtake than it was at this Grand Prix. But you get the impression whoever's quickest in qualifying, as long as they get off to a decent launch at the start, they'll probably win. So I'll still put my money on Hamilton, but could easily be Vettel or Bottas.
And Matty, go with a bit more outrageous prediction. Why the hell not? We're meant to be proven wrong, as analysts suppose.
Well, I was gonna go along the same lines, really. Just simply because it's a traditional Mercedes track, really. Suits their cars down to a bone. So Hamilton win.
Interesting. And in terms of the Grand Prix predictor stats, Nathan, pole position and positions gained.
Yeah.
Who's it going to be? Yep.
So no, hang on. Pole position, Hamilton.
Yep.
Positions gained. That's always a tough one on the predictor league. Positions gained could honestly be anyone. I'll chuck out. I'll say the same person who I actually predicted, for this Grand Prix, which is Verline / Giovinazzi, depending on which one actually races.
Very interesting. I think positions gained today was Giovinazzi.
Was it?
I think. Because no, it wouldn't be. Van Dorn gained 5 places. Might actually be Van Dorn. I think it's Van Dorn, yeah.
Yeah, by pretty much default.
Yeah, by default, because everyone else retired. Yeah, and I was a bit distraught because, in fact, for the predictor league, if Hamilton had beat Vettel, I'd have got the top 4, which would have been really nice. But I think the real F1 matters a hell of a lot more than the GP predictor. I think that's quite competitive. If you've got any more questions, make sure to send them in, because we've actually finished the overview of the teams right on time, actually, the hour in. So if you've got any questions, make sure to kind of ask us. If not, we'll wrap it up there, and I'll go and watch the Grand Prix of Qatar for the MotoGP. So why the hell not? Let's go on to our other motorsport talk whilst we're doing a live Australian Grand Prix review. Why not? Nathan, Esteban Gutierrez, former F1 driver, to Cheetah. Have you seen him?
Yeah,
I've seen interesting.
Yes, well, I mean, Gutierrez. I mean, I never really rated him in F1, but who knows? I mean, isn't he replacing Marchinquois?
Yeah, and even though he's not that good, I think anybody's better than Marchinquois.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you never know. Gutierrez. I mean, lots of the former F1 drivers have done quite well in Formula E. So
Verne being the standout for me. In Buemi, of course.
Yeah, of course, Buemi. But no, I mean, Gutierrez might surprise us all. But, well, I mean, we'll wait and see.
That'll be something we'll cover definitely next week.
We do have a question. Only just joined in, as everyone mentioned how bad Stroll is yet. I think I can elaborate on that a little bit. It was obviously disappointing qualifying for him. So, but the thing is, did he do any tests in an F1 car last season? Like any free practice sessions?
No, he was just confirmed in November, and then I think he just went on.
Yeah, so it's his first time in the car. He clearly doesn't look comfortable at the moment. So I think one of the major things is watching the Channel 4 commentary. At least David Coulthard was pointing out how much he was moving around in the car, like his legs, and that he didn't look stable in the car. But also how much he was moving the steering wheel. Looked very nervous in his opinion. I kind of agree with him there. So I don't think he's bad, but I think he's probably a little bit out of his depth at the moment. But you'll get used to it with time.
And Nathan, do you think that Lance Stroll's ready? I mean, he's younger than Max Verstappen, isn't he? So that's quite a frightening stat. Well, I mean, we thought Max Verstappen was the baby of F1, and then Lance Stroll comes in, who's even younger. So, do you think he's ready, Nathan, or do you think he needs another season in maybe a formula that's more similar to Formula 1, such as Formula 2 now, or GP3?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think I discussed this on another video, one of Ayrton UK's podcasts, possibly. Discussed it on something. But personally, what I would have done, because I think it would have been the safer bet at the very least, is I would have got in NASA and Massa, obviously, and then once NASA's old enough to meet the Martini requirements, then bring in Stroll, which I don't think it's too long for NASA. It's 25 you need to be.
Yeah.
I think actually, I don't even know how old NASA is, so I don't know why I'm saying that. But personally, I think it would have been good to have got Massa and NASA, so then Stroll can actually get some more practice, and then bring in Lance Stroll once he's had the practice in Formula 2 or whatever. But I mean, it's he's done one Grand Prix and a few testing sessions. You can't write him off just yet. But certainly, I mean, even if you just look at his qualifying pace, it was pretty bad compared to Massa. 2.1 seconds off in Q1. So compared to his teammates, so that's not really great. But I mean, you got to give him a few races at least. Much like the regulations everyone's been moaning about, you've got to give it at least a few races before you can, really say confidently, one way or the other.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, actually. I think Martin Brundle tweeted earlier saying, what do you think of the 2017 cars? And, the reactions were a lot different. And, some people are saying it was brilliant and saying that it was very interesting strategically. Some people saying that because there was no overtaking, it was boring as hell. Other people saying
you don't need overtaking for it to be exciting. You just need close racing.
Yeah, exactly.
We did have a lot of that today, in fairness.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you could say it was boring, but because it was the first. Yeah, I suppose you could say that. Yeah, it's probably predictable more than anything. But as I say, a lot of responses for difference, real different responses on there. And well, if you look at this time last year, I think it's better than this time last year. If you remember this time last year, we had elimination qualifying.
Yeah.
So anything's better than that. So
it's also important to note that Australia is not a brilliant track in terms of racing, and I need to credit F1 Games PlayStation for that, who's literally put that in the comments. Just echoing that, it's not a brilliant track, and I can only agree with them saying that the only reason it gets hype is because it's the first race. Yeah,
definitely interesting, but well, I don't really know what else to say because well, it's just it wasn't really a race that a lot happened in, but I think as fans we say it's a better race purely because somebody other than the top team won. Wouldn't you agree with that, Nathan? But the rating of a race is automatically increased as soon as somebody wins that we don't expect.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Not for me personally, because as someone who supports Hamilton, I was a little bit annoyed. But I mean, certainly, if you think back to the Vettel dominance days, I was happy when anyone other than Vettel won. So it's the same thing, really. I mean, it was quite a boring race, to be honest. I mean, actually, it was it wasn't great. But I think certainly the fact that Vettel won did kind of improve it a lot in people's minds. But personally, I think the regulations, I'm quite happy with the regulations at the moment. I mean, I like the idea behind it, the idea that the cars are quicker and that, the tyres are less fragile. And, and even in qualifying, if you look at qualifying, the gaps between teammates was massive. If you look at the gap between Grosjean and Magnussen, or Massa and Stroll, or
Hulkenberg and Palmer.
Yeah, Hulkenberg, Palmer, or Vettel, Raikkonen. I mean, it puts greater emphasis on the driver, which I think pretty much every F1 fan would agree is a good thing. But I mean, personally, I'm happy with the regulations. I think the race was a dud, but you can't write off an entire set of regulations after just one Grand Prix. I mean, even my favourites, I mean, the seasons which I enjoyed the most were 2007 and 2008. But I mean, even then, even in those seasons, there were quite a few extremely boring processional races. But yet, I'd still say the seasons were fantastic because there were a lot of good races. So that's what I mean. At least once you've done, 4 or 5 Grand Prix, if all of them have been dreadful, then maybe people will start having a case to say one way or the other how positive or negative the regulations have been.
A lot of the problem is people always look at things with rose-tinted glasses and forget that, a lot of F1 seasons, despite being regarded as great, had poor races.
Definitely.
So it's a bit. I think maybe there's a little bit of maturity with F1 fans, and I just want to highlight this a little bit now in the fact that at the podium, Vettel was cheered massively and Hamilton was booed. And you think back 4 years, that would have been the other way around.
You think back to that race in Singapore where Martin Brundle was saying about booing in Singapore. I remember that as clear as day. But very interesting to see Hamilton being booed on the podium. Well, we can go.
People loving an underdog, and
we could go into the politics of all that, but I think I get a little bit opinionated, so let's not. But on to the questions. We've got a few questions. We've got Ben here as well, and he asked, "Have we already discussed McLaren?" We have a hell of a lot.
Yes, of course.
But the Mountain Yorksman once again. Ben says that Massa could have been driver of the day. He performed well. But the Mountain Yorksman says, "Who was your driver of the day from this weekend? And who was the most disappointing?" And Massa's kind of got a case. And I actually put Valtteri Bottas as driver of the day. And I know this sounds really stupid because driver of the day, it's a weird system because obviously it's all voted for before the end of the race. So you could vote for someone who you think's had a brilliant race and then could crash everyone off at the last lap, which means he isn't driver of the day.
Verstappen.
Yep. Yep, definitely not driver of the day every time.
At least that meme's died.
Well, yeah, true.
Well,
but the two of you,
no,
the two of you, the two of you, do you think that Vettel was given the driver of the day justly today? Fairly.
Yeah,
I'd say so.
Yeah,
and when he had the chance out in the lead, so why not?
And how about the most disappointing driver? You could say Kimi, couldn't you? Actually,
that was worse than Kimi.
Yes, there was worse than Kimi. But if
you're going to say Palmer, aren't you?
If you look at people you had expectation for, you didn't really have much expectation for Palmer, did you, in the first place?
I thought he maybe could have done more. I think it's more disappointing with the comparison between him and his teammate. And I guess you could also state the same case for Kevin Magnussen in the fact that both of them just could not live with the pace of their teammates, and hence were disappointing in that sense.
I just hope for the sake of the sport and racing that it's just a temporary thing, because obviously you're going to have better drivers, but Palmer, Magnussen, you really want them all to catch up to the teammates and battle with each other just to prove who is the best out of each team. in this Formula 1 2017 season. We've really got a new era, and it's really reigniting the fans' passion for the sport, I think, and everyone really seemed happy at today's race. Maybe not after the race, because they said that, well, it could be a bit boring today, but I didn't think it was boring. I just thought it was, as Matty said earlier, predictable. But I think that really wraps it up for today's live Australian Grand Prix weekend review. And I believe, I won't quote me on this, it's actually just been a pilot episode, and we'll decide over on Motorcast whether we're doing a live Chinese Grand Prix review or whether it'll be after the race, pre-recorded and then uploaded, edited. Maybe we're going to do one every race. We might do a live session every race. We might do a live session one every 2 races. But we'll let you know over on the Twitter at Motorcast_ over the next few weeks. But that's been quite an interesting live stream. Definitely got the opinions of these two. Hopefully we'll have a special guest next time. And to round it off, because everyone loves this certain person's intro, outros, you know what's going to happen, Nathan?
No, go on.
You don't know?
No.
I hinted at outros and said your name. And seeing as we're at the end of the podcast,
yeah.
Is there any chance you could close out the podcast?
No, I'm all right, thanks.
Come on.
What, you want me to do my normal outro?
Okay. No, what the normal outro you mean? I'll see you then.
I thought that's what you were alluding to.
Oh, no, we're not doing that. No.
We mean the full one. Subscribe to Motorcast, follow us on Twitter at Motorcast_ for more reviews, previews, race reviews, all that kind of spiel.
Come on, Nathan, let's hear it.
Yeah, come on.
You want me to say exactly what Matty just said?
Except
well.
Except without all this spiel.
Okay, so everyone, be sure to subscribe to Motorcast, follow us on Twitter for all the latest motorsport news, updates, etc.
That's not what Matty said.
I can't even remember what he said. I was making it up. I thought I did a good outro then, and then you just talked over it.
All right, let's
We
try
do
again.
GP2 and stuff. Goodbye.
We do GP2 and stuff. Goodbye. This is what it's like on any other video, but okay, Nathan, I'll give you a chance. I'll shut up now, and then you can outro this video.
Well, I'm going to outro it. Just, I'm not going to quote exactly what Matty said. Right, okay. So, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that podcast, our first live podcast. And be sure to subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Twitter for all sorts of motorsports, reviews, previews, updates, news, etc. And we'll see you next time for whatever our next podcast is going to be. Probably Formula E, isn't it?
Oh, no. Well, you didn't realise that we had a MotoGP race tonight. For goodness sake,
yes,
Nathan.
MotoGP. That's the one. MotoGP race review around Qatar. Yeah, and we'll see you guys when that review comes out. And I apologise as a disclaimer for all the abuse we've given Nathan tonight, but hopefully you've enjoyed that podcast episode for the Australian Grand Prix. We'll be back in 2 weeks for the F1 Chinese Grand Prix. And I suppose as me and Nathan have done the outro, it'd be appropriate for Matty to say the final words.
Goodbye.
What an